ominous out here with the you hear the crickets going and the nighttime. Sorry, the camera doesn't pick up the lighting very well here, so y'all have to bear with me. Maybe I can try to make it a little bit lighter when I edit. Y'all know I'm not a great editor. So anyways, I want to talk about these food issues, and specifically we want to talk about Hurricane Ian, right? So Hurricane Ian shut down this large fertilizer plant in Florida, and people are kind of, especially in like the prepping, homesteading community, people are kind of panicking about this. And to me, I think this is a little bit of a nothing burger, because this fertilizer plant will just come back online as soon as the storm has been kind of cleared up, right? It might take a little bit of time depending on how much damage has been caused in that local area, but eventually the fertilizer plant will come back online. It is a large fertilizer plant that provides a substantial portion of fertilizer, but by the time they're calling for fertilizer again, right, which is going to be like next springtime, it'll come back online, and this will recover. So I don't think this is the big, to-do thing that's gonna cause a big problem. What I do think that we're bound to see is continuing rises in food prices, continually rising food prices. There we go. That's the correct English, right? Yeah. Sorry, not an English major, guys. Okay, so we haven't recovered from the logistics of the COVID fiasco and how we had this massive issue with the supply chain. We still have not recovered from the petroleum prices, and with the kind of looming war with Russia and the BRICS nations in general, we're seeing this is probably going to continue. And the one thing that we know is during any type of conflict, prices get worse. They don't get better, right? So we see prices of specifically metals, copper being a big one, brass, stuff like that is used in munitions, all that stuff skyrockets. And now there's so many electronics in warfare that you would see probably an increased demand for silver in that regard. That may cause similar issues. The big one is food, and this actually goes back to when we think about like the American Revolution, right? And part of when the Constitution was written, one of the things that was going on is that the British soldiers would come into the houses of the colonies, and they would basically take what they wanted and what they needed. So if they needed black powder and needed food and God knows what else, they would just take it. It was this is why this is all kind of written into our Bill of Rights, that we have these rights and that the government can't just do away with them, right? And so this food issue, when wars kick off and when we have this looming aggression of wars, we see these problems get worse. They don't get better. So I think we're inclined to see substantial rising in the food prices, and that this is going to continue to go up. We're likely to see more petroleum issues as the global demand for petroleum increases, because Russia's now picking and choosing who they want to sell to, specifically with the natural gas pipeline. And then we're seeing Saudi Arabia no longer playing kind of the same game they've been playing for the last 50 years. So what we've got this massive demand increase of petroleum products. And specifically, you talk about in a barrel of petroleum, I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's about 20 gallons of every 55-gallon drum of petroleum goes to actual gasoline. The rest of it is used in products like packing peanuts, chewing gum, diesel fuel, different fuel additives, stuff like that. And all this, there's just a million things that use petroleum. And so we see this demand increase because everything in our life now, from plastics to everything, uses petroleum. And so it's more than just the demand at the pump that's causing this problem. It's the ever-increasing demand that we have for petroleum products. Dogs are going to go crazy here in a minute. There must be something out there. So what we've got then too, we've got this increased demand, and then we've got an increased demand with ethanol, with us raising the ethanol percentages in our gasoline. We've got a lowered production of the corn, because the corn, because it wasn't getting fertilized, so the corn that's there is kind of substandard to what it normally is. But then the demand is higher, so we're not growing as much. What we are growing is not as good as what it has been in the past. And then we have these geniuses like the Bill Gates that have found ways of making synthetic meats. These synthetic meats are now poisoning the lab rats that they're feeding them to, and even though I believe that one was actually FDA approved. It's funny. Maybe somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that one was actually FDA approved. I'll find the article and post it down in the description. So anyways, there's all this stress on the food supply chain system, and this stress does not look like it's going to be alleviated, it's just going to continue to clamp down and get worse. And whether there ends up being a global war or not, this is going to continue to be a problem and to continue to put more and more stress on our food supply chain. This is why I believe it's so important to get with local producers, people that use organic farming methods that don't rely a lot on outside sources. One, there's two things that our farm relies on outside sources. One, we rely on hay, and that's simply because we don't have enough pasture yet. Over the next 2 or 3 years, we'll actually reduce that down, and we'll be making silage here on the farm, and we won't even need hay. And then when we raise pork, because pork generally has to be raised using products that you purchase, right, like feeds and stuff like that. Now, you can raise pork in a more wild setting. It's actually, if you know about old homesteaders, it's actually how pork was raised. So what people would do is they would have their little homestead, right, their little 5-acre homestead, and then they would just let 2 pigs basically run wild on this homestead, and then they'd go round them up and kill them, and the pigs grew much, much slower. They were a lot more aggressive. This is where you started getting introduction of wild boars and stuff like that. And for those of you that don't know, when a pig is raised in confinement, they when they get released, they actually go through a biological change. It's really interesting, but this is where you get like the wild boars that have the big tusks and everything, and they get really aggressive, and the razorbacks and everything, and they get super, just basically like a hardcore, like what you would think of as like a demon-possessed pig, right? That's actually happens to all pigs if they're released into the wild. They will revert to that. Something about them being domesticated keeps them more docile. And maybe there's a biologist out there that can tell us why that is, but basically that's what happens with pigs. And so these pigs would become a lot more aggressive, and so they'd only raise a couple of them. And they would raise them naturally. They wouldn't feed them at all. They'd maybe put out a water for them of some sort. But the pigs would just forage for their food, and then once a year they go out and kill them. They take a lot longer to get big. Anywhere right now, when you raise a pig, 6 to 8 months is kind of a standard. Most commercial farmers do it in 6 months. Small farmers like us do it in about 7 to 8, because the pigs get a little bit bigger. And so these farms that would do this, these homesteaders that would do this, they would have to raise these pigs out for a year to 3 years, depending on the breed of the pig. And so this made a substantial difference in the way that the pig production has changed over the course of the last, maybe 100, 200 years or so. And so you would find things like this that, from small producers, on a land like ours, we could actually have a lot of pigs running wild on it if we could contain them without much feed. But we'd have to increase our time to get that food. So we'd have to be raising them out for maybe 2 years before they'd be big enough to sell. So this is what I'm saying, is that you need to get with local producers that have their growing done correctly in a manner that is actually sustainable. That alleviates you of a lot of this supply chain stuff, because our prices for our pigs and our cows actually have not raised considerably. We've gone up. Not even a couple percentage points. Our prices are virtually the same as what they were before all the COVID stuff, before the supply chain, the logistics issues, because our cost of input just hasn't increased that much. And so that's what's really interesting when you start looking at these sustainable agricultural practices. That's what ends up happening. This is why I encourage you guys to find local producers now. If you don't have somebody that you're working with, you need to be looking for somebody that produces a good grass-fed cow, not a grain-fed cow. I got it. Grain-fed steaks taste better. They do. Grass-fed ground beef is by far better. But grain-fed steaks do taste better. But the problem is it's not a sustainable agricultural approach as a general rule. Doesn't mean you can't raise a couple out with grain, but it does mean that if we're raising everything out with grain, we increase our grain supply, or our grain demand, we increase the grain demand and then the supply following that. And this is one of the problems, is that a lot of these grains and corns and stuff require lots of fertilizers, lots of moving parts in them. There's combines and planters and all sorts of heavy equipment that requires the petroleum products to move it. And so, you look at like Greg Judy's farm, Green Pastures Farm, I think, he did all his hay without a tractor for years for a couple hundred head of cattle. I think he does about 150 head of cattle, and he moved all those big round bales, and he did it with a 4-wheeler, and he has a special lift on the back of his 4-wheeler that he designed, and that allowed him to move this. So these are just some things I want you guys to consider getting with local producers. But the bottom line is, and what I really want you to think about, the cost of food is only going to go up. So if you don't have food now, it is the time to be buying food and putting food away, because the cost of food next year, I don't know, I bet you 2 pregnant women to a pickle, it's 30% higher than it is this year. I just think that we're likely to see substantial increases, and it may go up from there. So I want you guys to keep that in mind as we go forward. This is going to be a rough year. I'm going to post a couple articles down in the description. I'm going to post that one about the rats that were basically getting sick off of the Bill Gates meat, quote unquote. And then I'll post the article down there about this fertilizer plant getting shut down. And you guys can make your own decisions about and your own determination and opinions about what that actually means. But now is really the time to be getting your house in order. If you don't have a source of food, you need to be getting it, and you need to be able to produce some of your own. Start looking at that. It doesn't matter if you live in a small subdivision and all you can have is a backyard garden. That helps, and that gets you some to put away. Eating tomato sauce and rice would be a hell of a lot better than not eating at all. Start looking at making sure that your equipment is taken care of, right? We're getting ready for the winter here on the farm, so one of the things that we do is we go through all of our mechanical components, and we do all our services, we check our generators out, we go through and get new tires on the vehicles that they're needed, we do all the maintenance, and make sure that everything is up to par. Making sure that you have good water and a water source available to you. Y'all know we have a well here on the farm. Not everybody has that capability, so storing some water, storing some bleach so that you can purify water, storing water filtration systems, something like a Berkey water filter that has a gravity-fed system that doesn't require any electricity. If we see electricity prices do what they did in Europe, right, where you're or in the UK, where I think they're seeing like 4x on some of their energy prices, specifically in their electricity prices. If we see that here, which is not that far off when you think about it, when you think that this issue with Russia could very easily start to filter back to us. If we start seeing a 4x in our electricity bill, what are we going to do? You know, you're talking about, hey, pull everything out of the deep freezer and start canning. Get all the light bulbs out, because I don't want any kids even turning on lights, right? They can use a headlamp. You know, we're talking about to where go down to the bare essentials, and this is not far off to be prepared for this. I'm not telling you to go live like a hermit. I'm not telling you to live in fear of this happening. What I am telling you is to be smart about this. Have some cash on hand. That looks like that's going to be ever more important with the looming bank runs that may be out there, especially if some of these rumors come true about banks basically being in foreclosure, right? We got different large banks that are looking for bailouts from the feds, and this stuff is going to get worse. Dogs are about to go crazy because there's something out there, so I'm going to sign off with that, guys. I really just wanted to talk to you for a minute about just get your stuff in order. Things are not getting better. They're getting worse. Everything that everybody on these prepper channels, right? And I say that with quotes because we've never identified as a prepper channel. So it just kind of goes hand in hand with homesteading lifestyle, and you don't have to be a prepper to think a little bit ahead, right? You're all a prepper. You know, you have insurance on your house in case you have a fire. So we're all preppers to some extent. It's just, where do we draw the line? Well, I want to draw the line at a point that my family and our security here is as safe as we can reasonably make it. Does that mean I'm not taking a vacation? No. Does that mean that I'm not going to go do some of the things that I want to go do? Absolutely not. I'm still going to take the kids away. We're going to go camping. You know what I mean? We still want to have a life. But we can certainly do some things to keep our house and our things in order. So I will let y'all go. I really appreciate y'all watching. Hey guys, this channel has just exploded lately, so make sure you like and subscribe to the videos if you haven't done so. I love reading the comments. I know I don't get a chance to respond to all of them, but I do read every single comment that comes across there. I just enjoy hearing y'all's thoughts on it. So if you comment down there, know that I will see it. I may or may not always get a chance to respond to it. There's just so many out there now, especially we have videos now doing several 100,000 views, and it just makes it really difficult to see. We've got some great stuff coming to you here over the future, and we're getting ready to be doing some stuff on Patreon. So bear with us as we continue to grow and continue to build, guys. I really appreciate all the support that we've had, and we'll see y'all here later this week.